licensed clinical psychologist in California. I have a private practice in Berkeley, California. And I'm also a registered Expressive Arts therapist. A big part of my orientation is Jungian. Carl Jung's been a big influence on me and my outlook and my practice. So I'm teaching a module on Jungian psychology. Basically, the idea of the module is it's going to be an overview of some of the primary concepts of Jungian psych with both a theoretical and an experiential component. So the idea is that you'll get to live the concepts and engage with them in a way that's practical and that hopefully is an opportunity to then apply those ideas. Some of the concepts that we'll cover are shadow, capital S self, complexes, archetypes, anima, animus. Basically, this is going to be a mythopoetic lens on the psyche. So it's a symbolic lens. And part of the what Jungian psychology explores is the relationship between the individual and the collective. You could say the dream and the myth, so where the dream is the individual myth and the myth is the collective dream. Right? So we can learn a lot about ourselves and about symbolism through mythology, and we can learn a lot also through the individual pathway of the dream. And really any creative expression has in it unconscious symbolism that we can then reflect on and understand a bit more about how we see the world. One way to understand that is that in our process of identity formation, ego formation, personality formation, learning, we are starting to differentiate self from other. Who am I versus what is not me? Jung's idea is that when we do that, we repress some of those parts that are not me into the unconscious. Both the theory and practice of Jungian psychology is how do we reclaim that? The lens through which we see the world is shaped by this identity formation. That plays a role in how we understand ourselves, how we understand others, our relationships. Whatever's unconscious and repressed can show up in us and them. You could say it's the root of racism and sexism and oppression, colonization, and all the ways that we break ourselves into segments, and all the ways that we act out these things in our relationships. So one of the benefits of studying this and of learning how to work with the concepts and learning how to work with some of the practical tools, we get to see more clearly the subjective lens through which we're seeing the world, through the symbolism that is inherent in all of these creative expressions, including dreams and imagination. And then we can reclaim those parts. We can also understand our relationships better. And when it comes to clinical practice, when it comes to working with a client, we can understand the clinical relationship better. We can understand the client's dreams. We can understand the lens through which the client is seeing the world, and also help them to understand their own lens. Part of how Jung conceptualizes wounding and trauma is that there's a psychic split that happens when we confront the world and when we're forced to say, this is not me, I'm going to put that over here, right? And maybe that happens, our parental relationships or through, traumatic experience, where in order to psychologically survive, we have to take a stance in order to understand what's happened here. Right? The path to healing is about reclaiming those split off parts from ourselves. Jung talks about the archetype of the wounded healer. Right? Contains the concept, first of all, that we're all wounded. So it recognizes that in order to get where we are, we've had traumas, and we've cut off these parts of ourselves. Right? But as the therapist, that also means that not only are we all healers, but we are not the healer to the wounded one, right? We're all wounded and we're all healers. So we are not waving a magical wand and being the healer to the wounded client. We are two wounded people entering a room. And as the therapist, I'm trying to help the client to get in touch with their inner healer and find their own integration. Right? So I'm their guide in that process. This reclaiming process, when it comes to healing and well-being, a lot of these tools are very life-affirming, and they're very they're integrating, they're grounding, they help us to reshape our relationships so that we're seeing things more clearly rather than through our own narratives. We all have those narratives. In these times, there's a lot of division, there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of strife. Right? And on one level, noticing our reactions across these divides, even political divides, and it doesn't mean that there isn't an ethical engagement with this, because there is, and Jung emphasized this ethical engagement. But we can also recognize what is evoked in us in these conflicts, right? And that part of the idea of a complex is that our emotional experience is a reaction to those parts of ourselves as much as it is to something external. As a very left-leaning American, what is the Donald Trump within me that I have to grapple with? What is that shadow figure, and what does it evoke in me, and how can I wrestle with it and in a way make peace with it so that I'm reacting to the situation rather than to my old stuff, my old traumas and wounds, right? And then right now also we find ourselves in a pandemic, right? So on one level, this is a mythic experience. It may evoke all kinds of narratives about apocalypse or zombies or things like this, right? There's so many stories that start this way, that include this unseen and unconscious force that is, this force of nature that is beyond our control, right? We also have all these natural disasters, right? There's this way that we're grappling with not just the awe, but also the dread of our contact with these collective forces. We're really coming to terms with the fact that we as humans are part of the ecosystem, right? Part of the microbiome, part of the environment, part of the atmosphere that, through storms and hurricanes and wildfires, we're being humbled by this. If we're really paying attention, we have to recognize and grapple with forces that are far beyond our control. And if you look across the history of mythology, there are so many stories of the gods destroying us with flood or fire or pestilence, right? We like to pretend we're separate from that, right? But that's ego talking. Jung has a quote from an interview he gave at one point, and it is something to the effect of, God is the name that I give for anything that disrupts my willful path violently. We have intentions in the world, we have agendas, right? But these are also ego agendas. And wrestling with that violent disruption, all of our hopes and dreams, that's real, right? That's a confrontation with reality. And we have to have that sooner or later. Right? Sooner or later, our ego doesn't get what it wants. Jungian psychology offers tools for practicing acceptance of this through a contact with the unconscious.